World-renowned Australian horseman Warwick Schiller is as passionate about men's health as he is about horses. I recently caught up with Warwick, who shared some fascinating insights into his life and the way he thinks. With over 20 million views on his YouTube channel, I'm obviously not the only one who thinks he's worth listening to. Hi Warwick, and thank you for joining me on Life Journey. And it's quite ironical because you have a podcast which is called Journey On, so we have that in common.
Yeah, we do. G'day, Kelly. How you going?
Very well, thank you. And, we do have a lot in common because we have friends in common. We have fathers who rodeoed together very long time ago, and we're both doing a similar kind of thing to try and help people. So although I am not the horse trainer that you are.
Well, I don't know. These days, I started out training horses, and all the social media stuff started out about training horses. But, in the last few years, it's taken a bit of a turn. And these days, it's almost just more about, not necessarily that I'm helping people with themselves, but just helping people become more aware of themselves, which helps them with the horses, but it also helps them with pretty much everything else that's going on too.
Warwick, this month is Movember. Do you have Movember over there in the States? I mean, you're aware of Movember because you're from Australia originally, but is there a similar campaign over there at all?
No, not really. And there's not, we wouldn't have much of that going on over here. Like Australia in the last, quite a few years, has really got into being aware of men's mental health. I think, like the drought, even before the drought, but the drought brought that to, the forefront sort of thing. But no, there's not really something like that over here, really.
Yeah, righto. That's interesting because, as you said, the last few years in Australia, people are really pushing men's mental health particularly, and I guess mental health overall, but attempting to help men, because I think there's there's 8 people in Australia every day who take their lives, and 75% of those are men. So that's huge, isn't it? But anyway, we have to try and make those numbers better and reduce them drastically. Warwick, I want to start off with your trip with your son Tyler, who you took on a trip to Mongolia on a Gobi cold camel expedition. And the reason I want to start with this story is it's so interesting. But what a fantastic thing to do for Tyler when he's just finished school, about to go out into the world, to teach him about courage and resilience and challenges. And I just think the whole idea was amazing. So would you please tell us about the Gobi camel expedition?
Well, it's organised by a girl from New Zealand, and she's her business card says author, horsewoman, adventurer. She's a full-on adventurer, and her name's Chloe Phillips Harris. And Chloe went to Mongolia a few years ago to be in the Mongol Derby. It's a 1,000-kilometre horse race across the plains of Mongolia. If you remember back when the bicentennial was on in 1988, when all the tall ships sailed into Sydney Harbour, her father owned one of those ships. She grew up having an adventurous father, so she's pretty much an adventurer, but she organised the whole thing. And this is the 3rd year she's done it, and she had asked me to come on it before, and usually my stuff's booked out. I'm booked out like 6 or 8 months ahead of time, and she'd contact me and I've got something on then. And so when my son was going to graduate uni, I thought that'd be good if we could do that. So I contacted her and said, "Are you doing it again?" And she said, "Yeah." And it was far enough ahead that I could open up the space for it. So so it was 2 weeks of riding camels across the Gobi Desert in the middle of winter. You ride about 30 to 40 Ks a day. There's a couple of half days in there, and you stay in the gers, which is the round nomadic tents. So you stay in gers at the nomads' camps every night. And it's absolutely amazing. Very, very cool.
Yeah. So you went in the dead of winter, and I think you said in the podcast it was minus 45 at night and minus 25.
45. And the coldest on the thermometer it got down to was about minus 30. There was one day we were on this windswept hill and the wind was blowing. It was freezing cold. And they said with the wind chill, it would have been minus 40 that day. But, we were lucky because 2 weeks before we got there, it was minus 40 every night. And we were thinking this one's going to be a cold one because they've done it twice before. The first year they went, one of the camps they were at, they woke up the next morning and there was, like 15 dead sheep and 2 dead cows or camels or something or other outside. Like they just froze to the ground, So we were lucky it wasn't as cold as it has been in the past. And, one of the girls who went on the first one, she's from New Zealand, she said to me, after about day 4, you will be as cold as you've ever been, you will be as sore as you've ever been, and you will be rubbed raw as you have ever been, and you want the clouds to open up and the hand of God to come down and pick you up and just take you off the camel. And then she said, by about day 6, you kind of get through that and it gets better. So we were, Tyler and I were both wondering, can we do this? Can we put up with all that? But it wasn't that cold. So we had the cold to deal with, but not the extreme cold. But there were days that were still challenging, yeah.
Oh, so what do you think, obviously you got a lot out of it, but for Tyler as a young person, what do you think he got most out of that trip?
You know what? He really loves connecting with other cultures, especially, maybe like third world cultures, people that don't have what we have, and just seeing how happy they are. We've been to Africa and, and he's been to Africa a couple of times. He went on while he was at uni, he went on it's called a Global Medical Brigade, I think, and they go around the world doing humanitarian things. And so he went to Ghana for a couple of weeks and they were setting up clinics to test malaria, I think. And so, he's been in some other third world countries and I think it just makes him still as amazed. These people have what we would consider nothing, and they're usually the happiest people you ever met.
Mm-hmm. That is amazing. You hear that often, don't you? And I think during that video, that podcast, you actually said you only met one man who wasn't happy the whole trip. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had, he had that destination addiction thing going on where he had 500 camels, but he wished his dream was to have 1,000 camels. But they ferment the camel milk and you drink the fermented camel milk, but they also distill it and make what they call camel milk vodka out of this fermented camel milk. And this guy, he was the only one I saw there that was drunk. This guy got just plastered, wasted, drunk in the tent at night time, and he kept saying how I'll be happy when I have 1,000 camels. But I think looking at him that when he gets 1,000 camels, then he'll wish he had 1,500 camels, and when he gets 1,500 camels, he'll wish he had 2,000. I think but he was probably the only unhappy person I saw there. They're not the most smiling people. They're kind of stern, but in their eyes you can tell they're pretty jovial. They like a good time.
And Warwick, was it as tough as what that girl had told you?
No, like we didn't get chafed at all. We got told what to take with us, and there's a cream that the bike riders, the bicyclists, the guy that you see out pedaling out the road, they use so they don't get rubbed on their bum on the thing. And the way it was told to me was, first thing in the morning when you get dressed, pull down your Dax and just fill your hand up with that thing and basically just fill your bum crack up so there's no bum crack anymore. And it feels like you've caught yourself for the first half hour, but then you just the feeling goes away. But we didn't get any rubs at all. But the soreness, the camels have got they will walk, they do walk, they trot, or they don't trot, they pace. And every once in a while they'll canter. But the only time the camels I rode ever cantered when they were about to buck. But But they have the pace that they have, the trot that they have, they go like 3 speeds. And one's real slow and you can just sit there and it's just a little jog and you can sit there on that all day long. And one's real fast where they got a lot of energy and they kind of throw you up and down and so you don't have to do any work. But the one you spend most of the day at is this trot where you've actually got to stand up and sit down and stand up and sit down. And the stirrups are kind of hung in such a way they're kind of in front of you, not directly underneath you. And so it just puts a lot of strain on your knees and your ankles. And so, you know, there's hours of that sort of thing, but then there's no water available. Like cold drinking water. Everything's either frozen or hot, and so you don't really drink lots of water. So you can tend to get a bit constipated, and I got that going on. So I spent 2 days with like a very painful stomach, and sitting on it was painful, and so you're either trotting on these camels or bouncing up and down these camels, like being punched in the stomach every second for 2 days. So that's probably the thing I had trouble with is the ride, and I wasn't the only one, because you either, you know, when they say when you go out there, you don't want to poop too much, but you don't want to poop too little, and you know, you can get diarrhea or you can go the other way, and neither of them are very much fun riding 30 k's on a camel, I tell you.
Warwick, some of the people that went on that expedition couldn't ride at all. They didn't ride horses. So that must have been really tough and overwhelming for them to start with, to hop on an animal. And
yeah, there was one lady from Canada there who has never ridden any animal astride. You know, never sat on anything, and she rode every day because they have support vehicles. So there was a lady there from New Zealand. Her and her husband went on the trip. She's a rider. He's not. And he rode the first half a day and then didn't ride for 2 or 3 days, and he rode another half a day and then didn't ride for a few days. And, he spent most of his time in the support vehicle. So there is that option. But this one lady from Canada who doesn't ride rode the whole way.
Wow.
All day, every day. And so not only you just learn to ride, you got to learn to ride and ride for 8 hours. You know, there's no getting off sort of thing. It was pretty amazing, some of the people that didn't ride much that stuck it out,
Yeah. So I would encourage anyone who's interested, and honestly, it's the most interesting story, to head over to your podcast to listen particularly to that. And my parents-in-law are going on a long trip shortly, and so I'm going to load it up for them so they can listen to it on the way to Brisbane. But I had a couple of questions just that were interesting to me, and probably as a woman I'm thinking about the washing, and because in your podcast Tyler's quite open about the little accident that he had. So did anyone do your washing for you, or did you have to just stay in those clothes for 10 days?
You stay in the same clothes for 12 days. You don't have a shower.
Wow, 12 days.
Yeah, 12 days. You have a bit of a pommy shower. You know, you've got like wipes and you'll wipe yourself down. And you know, the cold, before we left, they said to the women, be careful, because there's no looms. You just go out in walk out in the scrub. Blur distance, they call it. So anything you don't want, any part of your body you don't want someone to see up close, you go far enough away to where it's blurry to them. And but they said to the women, when you squat down to pee, you've got to try to keep your it's called a deal. It's a big furry dressing gown sort of thing around you, because it's so cold that your pee can freeze to you before it's completely out, and you can get a UTI.
Oh my gosh!
On that UTI, so it can be that cold, where the pee can freeze to you. So yeah, it's a those nomads are pretty amazing. I mean, they just live in tents all year round. They have 4 camps. They have a summer camp, a spring camp, a autumn camp, and a winter camp. And they're just amazing people. They just like I said, they live in tents all year round. And what's amazing is they don't have running water, but every cooking utensil they use is spotless. They've got these big aluminium pots and stuff. And if you don't just scrub an aluminium pot, it gets a bit grungy looking or whatever. No, everything looked like it was brand new. It wasn't, because every nomad had it, but I don't know. I just don't know how they stay that clean. Even their clothes are clean. They don't have washing machines. They don't have running water. It was kind of like when we were in Kenya. We spent a day with the Maasai, and they live in just a dust bowl, and they're spotlessly clean. Like that white dress you're wearing right now, they'd be wearing something like that, wouldn't have a mark on it. And I just, yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah, and people that live in such extreme climates are just, that just blows my mind. And I must say, I'm very happy and very interested to hear about it, but I don't think I'll be signing up. Take my hat off to both you and Tyler for putting yourselves through that. Now, let's move on to the mental health aspect of our interview, Warwick, because I know you're very, very passionate. And I know you've suffered depression yourself, but was there a catalyst for that, or is it just something that happened in your life?
The depression thing, I didn't go to a therapist and go, hey, I feel different, what's going on? I discovered it by chance, but I'd been depressed for so long I didn't even know there was another way to be.
Warwick, before we move on, I just want to ask you what that looked like for you. What did your depression look like?
No feelings whatsoever. No fear, no visceral sensations, and I'd never had them, so I didn't even know they were a thing. If you said, someone ran over my dog, I'd go, I feel sorry for you. But I wouldn't actually feel sorry for you. I'd think sorry for you. I'd think, I wouldn't, if someone ran over my dog, I would be sad in my head, but I didn't feel it in my body. I didn't have visceral sensations. I didn't have gut sensations. I mean, the only sensations I've probably ever had are, like fear and dread in the pit of my stomach and heartbreak and being in love in my heart, but basically nothing else. And so that's what it was like, and a great deal of apathy. Just not much get up and go, just a blur kind of feeling, But it was so normal for me that it wasn't like, I want to go and find out about this.
You didn't know any different?
No.
That's amazing.
If you think about it, at school, they don't have a class where they go, okay, children, so if you're a fully functioning human being, when someone says something sad, you should feel this in here. And if someone says something, you should feel this in, they don't tell you that. They don't tell you that those things, it's just kind of taken for granted.
Yeah.
They don't tell you how to blink and they don't tell you how to breathe because it's taken for granted you do that. And so I really had no idea of the full range of emotions. And I really think that, men growing up in my generation, a lot of them didn't because, I'll get to the catalyst. The catalyst was someone telling me about this lady named Brené Brown. So I got an audio book of hers called The Power of Vulnerability. And in that book, she said, you cannot selectively suppress emotions. If you suppress the lower emotions, fear, grief, those sorts of things, you automatically suppress the higher emotions. If you suppress the extreme end of the lower emotions, you also suppress the extreme end of the higher emotions. And I thought, that's interesting. I've never thought of that before. I know that, growing up my generation, you're taught to not show fear and all that sort of stuff. And in my family, you don't show grief. So, you kind of go to a funeral like, he's dead, on you go. And so I thought, I wonder, could I feel more of the higher emotions? Could I feel more joy? Could I feel more happiness? I'd never really thought about that. And so that's what led me down the garden path to looking into this stuff. And it's a bit of a rabbit hole when you get down it. But Brené Brown says that she used to only research women and girls. She was only trying to help women and girls. And then at some point in time, she realized if we're doing nothing for men and boys, we're doing nothing for women and girls. If you think about all the blowback, the fallout from men having to hold all that stuff in, who do they take it out on? Who does it, think about, the diggers, World War I, World War II, they come back and they didn't talk about it, but who had to put up with the fallout of it? Their wives, their children. So so I think, I think when you're looking at men's mental health, you really are looking at everybody's mental health, because the saner we are, the silly stuff you guys have put up with.
And I mean, we're all human, and we all think and we should all think and feel the same, because we're all made the same. But it's almost like you said, you growing up where men didn't show that. They didn't feel grief and they didn't feel sadness, and they did, but they just weren't allowed to say that they did. And that must cause so many problems, even to this day, where men feel like they can't, they tend to brush over it a bit, or that's the only way they know how to handle things.
Yeah, I think so. I recently went to a 3.5-day thing called a men's emotional resilience training. And the guy leading it, he's a former combat soldier. He spent 2 or 3 years touring around with Tony Robbins, doing the on-stage stuff with Tony Robbins. He's done a lot of different things, and he's really into the men's mental health work. And so there was 7 of us at this weekend retreat, different types of people. Like one guy's a fireman, and here in America, your fireman is like a paramedic in Australia. Like the first person they're called first responders. So the first person on the scene of an accident is not the ambulance guy, it's the fire guy. If someone has a heart attack or whatever, and you call what's 911 here, triple O in Australia, the fire truck shows up first. Okay, they're the first one on the scene. So this guy, he's a fireman, but he's on the scene of accidents, all sorts of stuff. And, he's got 2 daughters that are teenagers. And so he shows up to accidents where there's a teenager splattered all over the highway or whatever, who is the same age as his daughter. And he's got to be able to, keep all that stuff in. He's got to keep his stuff together. And so there was people like that. One guy there was a former UN hostage negotiator. So pretty heavy sort of stuff. But anyway, what I got out of the whole weekend was, because the first night we get there Thursday afternoon, we have dinner, and then we go in the living room. So it's up in the mountains of Southern California, and it's a big 6-bedroom cabin thing up in the mountains. And we go into this big living room the first night and sit down, and the guy running the whole thing says, okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go around. First, I want you to introduce yourself, tell us your name, tell us something that rhymes with your name so we can remember your name easier. And then I want you to tell us a secret you've held all your life and never told anybody. That's the first, right off the bat. Tell us something you've never told anybody. And he said, and I'll go first. And he told us something that was the most horrifying. We're like, you did that? And it kind of opened it up to having people really open up and not tell you the half the story, but the full story. And it was 3.5 days. And I got more out of that than I've got out of 3 years of therapy. Got more body sensations, got emotions in parts of my solar plexus that have never worked before. But the thing I got out of that was, as a man, no matter what fear that you have inside that you think I couldn't tell anybody else because no one would understand, everybody had the same one. Everybody. And so one guy was a filmmaker, and he's really artistic and kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say effeminate, but bordering on that end of the masculine scale. And like one guy, like I said, was a former UN hostage negotiator. So he's on there was a couple of guys there who were complete badasses, And when it came down to really opening up and like letting it all out, everybody had the same fears. It was mind-blowing, the fact that, because you kind of think, oh, well, I might tell them this, but they're not going to get it, and they're probably going to think I'm stupid or whatever. But then the badass guy will spit out exactly the same thing. And it was pretty amazing, very amazing. And as a man, I think there's something about being able to kind of bare your soul to a room full of men that's completely different than, like, I think, yeah, every therapist I've had has been a woman. And so there's something completely different about spilling your guts to not just one man, but a room full of men who, 2 days ago were strangers. It's pretty transformational. And everybody had the same experience, like coming out of that. Like, it was just the most amazing weekend.
So, Warwick, do you think it got down to just being letting those secrets out, I suppose, or just being more honest, not only with them but with yourself as well? Do you think that was the pivotal marker?
Yeah, there's so much stuff went on, but a few years ago I got a book called Backbone, and it's a men's guide to whatever, forget what it was. But anyway, in that book, he was saying that most men spend all their life trying to find 4 things at the same time. They want material wealth, they want vocational success, they want health, and they want love. So material wealth is you've got enough money to where if you want something, you can buy it. Doesn't necessarily mean you have endless amounts of money, but you want a new car, you can buy a new car. You want a ski boat or whatever it is. Vocational success. So whatever it is you do, if you're a farmer, you get New South Wales Farmer of the Year, or you're in the Land newspaper because your wheat crop's the best crop in the district. And vocational success, the top of whatever it is you do, health and love. And he says that most men spend all their life trying to get all 4 of those things at the same time. And they're kind of like that camel herder guy. If I could just get those 4 things at the same time, I'd be happy. And most men don't get there. But the ones that do get there and go, is this it? Like, I thought I'd feel different. I know Jim Carrey says that I wish everybody could be rich and famous so that they could figure out that it's not what you want. It's not what you think it would be. So in this book, he says there's those 4 things, and most men think if I could have all 4 of those things, I'd be happy, which is not true. He says if you get to the place where you get those 4 things and then you're like, that's not it, what is it? He says there are 3 things you've got to have. Number 1, you've got to have a purpose for being here. What's your mission? What are you doing here on this earth? What are you going to leave behind? What's your legacy? It's your purpose. Number 2 is you have to have a deep and authentic spiritual belief. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be religious or whatever, but you have to have a deep and authentic connection to something bigger than you. And I really think, like, people in Australia that live on the land, that might just be the land itself. And then number 3 is you've got to get rid of your bullshit. And that's what this weekend did for most people, I think. Where, you have all this stuff that's happened to you over your life, and all these regrets you have, and all these hurts you have, and things that people did or you did to other people, whatever, that are inside you. And they kind of hold you back. And when you get that stuff unstuck, you're completely different. It's pretty amazing. It's amazing what, like, some of the people going through some of that stuff there, it was like they're having an exorcism. Really, it looked like, I thought an alien was going to pop out of their belly, sort of thing, during some of the stuff. It was that, if you had a video, you'd think, what the hell's going on there? Like, is he possessed or something or other? But it's just this stuff coming out. And yeah, everybody there had the same experience, to where they're like, wow, I feel free, I feel light, and for me, I've had huge, like I said, I feel visceral sensations of a type I've not felt before. So I've been opening this stuff up for a few years now, but there's parts of my gut, sensations that now work that I've never felt before. And it's interesting, like watching a movie. If something sad happens, it's weird for me, because it's like it's in 3D, because not only am I seeing it and hearing it, I'm feeling it too, which I didn't before. You watch it. I mean, I cried when old Yeller died as a kid, but normally I don't get that sort of somatic sensation from watching, because they're even having conversations with people. People bring stuff up, and I get these things that you guys call feelings, and it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. You talked about that book, Warwick, but the other book was The Mask of Masculinity that you challenged people to read, and I have not read it yet, but I've heard you speak about it. And one of the masks of masculinity is being a know-it-all, and you alluded to the fact that that was you at one point. So tell me about that.
Well, the Masks of Masculinity, it's written by a guy named Lewis Howes, and he was an athlete here in America. I think he played in the NFL for a while, but was a big-time college athlete. Played in the NFL, and then I think he became a decathlete or something after that, but was very successful at sport and then in business afterwards. And then he had something happen. I don't know what it was, and I think it was he watched the show on it, about it, but he finally realised that, you know, when men are taught to suppress their emotions, like as a kid, you don't show fear, you don't show grief, whatever, you come up with ways of hiding it when it wants to pop up. When your emotions want to come up, you come up with ways of pushing them back down. And so I think there's 9 masks of masculinity. One's the aggressive mask. So, you know, most bullies have that. You know, you prod the bear a little bit and they're just going to get aggressive and attack you. There's the alpha male, the alpha mask, which is a bit like that one. There is so a lot of CEOs and stuff have that one. There's the joker mask, which is, you know, if someone asks you a question and it's a bit too close to the bone, you sidetrack them and crack a joke or whatever. And it's interesting in that book, they talk about Robin Williams. You know, everybody thought Robin Williams was having a great time, but he wasn't really. And there's a big comedy place in LA called the Comedy Store, and the guy that owns that thing, if you go there and you say, hey, I want to be a comedian here at the Comedy Store, he makes you go and see a therapist, because he knows that if you want to be a professional comedian, you're severely depressed. And then the reason you're severely depressed is because you have practiced cracking jokes to break up hard questions so much that you're so good at it that you now want to be a professional comedian. But he basically said anybody who's a professional comedian, it's just an overabundance of that mask. It's just they've cracked jokes all their life to avoid the hard questions that they got so good at. They're professional comedians. What's some of the other ones? But one of them's the know-it-all mask. One's the joker mask, and one is the athlete mask. You know, as if I can just win this or win that or win that, whatever, then people won't question me. I'll be complete. But yeah, for me, I had both of those. There's I think I had a bit of the know-it-all mask and a bit of the joker mask. You know, if you think about the nervous system, you know, when you have the fight, flight, or freeze components to it, and I've always had the freeze component to me. So I've never had the aggressive mask because I wasn't a fighter. I think how you're wired will kind of depend on what mask you choose, but we all choose them. And the thing this guy I really get out of the book was a lot of people are successful, and they're successful because of their masks. And so you're successful and you're miserable, and you've got to do the inner work and dig down and figure out what mask you have, and then you've got to take time to work through it, and then you can be successful and happy. But you know, if your success comes because of the mask you got good at hiding from your emotions, you're successful, but you're kind of an empty shell of a person.
I'm actually looking forward to reading that book, and those kind of books are so valuable to the human race as a whole, because if everybody was able to read, you know, particularly that book, I guess, those kind of books give you so much understanding of how and why someone might be acting or be. And, you know, we all know people who are know-it-alls, but if you know why they're being like that, I think that will create more understanding and more kindness. And those kind of books are so good at helping others understand why someone is reacting like they do.
I think a lot of Australians, rural Australians, like the next door neighbour, his fences are too tight, they're too loose, they're too short, he bred his cows too early, he joined the cows too late, he marked the calves too early, he shore the sheep too early, shore the sheep too late, his sheep are lousy. It's just like, I go back there and I hear those conversations. It's like, it's just a non-stop diatribe of judgment about everything that's going on. That's totally unnecessary, but it's something that well, at least I grew up with, and it's been an interesting journey getting to where you can look at things without, and I don't even mean saying it out loud, but looking at things without naming and judging and comparing it. Just look at it and just take in what you see rather than apply all this stuff to it, And I think that's a big part of mental health, is not necessarily what you do and what you say. It's what happens in here all the time. And if you can just settle that thing down to where you're not just, like I've been meditating for a few years now. And I imagine, when I was a kid growing up, you talked about meditating, they go, what a whack job. But, there's a really good book. If anybody's listening to this and you want help with some of this stuff, but you're not into anything woo, so the word meditation just kind of sends you crazy. There's a really good book by a fellow named Sir John Hargrave, and it's called Mind Hacking. It's basically taking care of your mental health without having any woo-woo labels on it, no therapist-y stuff attached to it. He just tells you to do these exercises. And like meditation, he just calls it concentration. It's a concentration exercise. That's all it is. It's working on your concentration. He talks about so there's people around the world who go to this competition, and it's the memory competitions. Like they'll give you a page of numbers, and you got to memorize. Get 2 minutes to look at it, and then you got to be able to repeat. 600 numbers in a row or whatever. They have these competitions, and he says most of those people, it's not they've got good memories. It's got they've got a good ability to concentrate, and so he has this. He calls it concentration training. He doesn't call it meditating, but what he tells you to do is exactly what they tell you to do to meditate. And so it just takes the woo-woo completely out of it. And all meditating is just having your mind not take you for a ride, where you just can control what your thoughts are a little bit. And, a lot of people, I don't know if anybody's listening to this has tried to meditate and they say they can't. And I've had a lot of people say, because at clinics, I'll say, has anybody here ever tried to meditate? And a lot of people put their hand. I say, has anybody here tried to meditate and can't? A lot of people will put their hand up, and I will say to them, why can't you meditate? And they all say roughly the same thing, which is, I just can't get my mind to stop thinking. Okay, I'll be, the meditation says I'm supposed to focus on my breathing. I'll be thinking about my breathing, but then I'll realize, I'm not thinking about my breathing, and see, I suck. I can't meditate. And I tell them, I'm going to talk you through what a meditation looks like. Okay, so let's say you're supposed to sit down and focus on your breathing. You're supposed to feel the breath going in your nostrils, feel your abdomen expanding, feel your abdomen contract, and the breath come out your nostrils. That's what you're supposed to be thinking about. So this is what it sounds like in your head. So the breath's going in my nostrils. I feel my belly getting bigger. My belly's getting smaller. The breath's going out my nostrils. The breath's coming in my nostrils. I wonder what's for tea tonight. I think we're having chicken. I wonder if that chicken when it was alive was a boy chicken or a girl chicken. I wonder if you can tell. I mean, you can tell when they're bigger that there's a boy chicken and a girl chicken, but when they're little, sorry, I say chicken because Americans don't know what chooks are, but when they're little and they're little yellow things, then how do you tell if it's a boy or a girl? You like the little ones you see at Easter time. Easter time, I like Easter. Easter's good because you have a lot of chocolate, and I like chocolate. Oh, hang on. I'm supposed to be thinking about my breathing. Focus on it. And right about then people go, I suck. I'm supposed to be thinking about my breathing, and I'm thinking about all this other stuff. And I tell them, there's an American philosopher named Wayne Dyer, and he says when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And most people go through that little mental thing right there. And when they realize that they're thinking about chocolate at Easter time instead of focusing on the breathing, they go, oh, I suck, I can't do it. But what you got to realize is you are now doing it. So there's a spiritual guy called Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you've ever heard of Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
But he says when you become aware that you're not present, you are present. because when your mind goes off on the chooks and boy chooks, girl chooks, baby chickens, Easter, all that stuff, you don't know that you're doing it. And at some point in time, you become aware, hell, I'm not thinking about the thing anymore. You are present right then. So what this Sir John Hargrave does, he says, give yourself a point for every time you realise you're off track. So what happens initially, you start focusing on your breathing, then you think about getting hungry, what's for tea tonight, chickens, boy chickens, girl chickens, little yellow chickens, Easter, chocolate. Oh, I'm not thinking about my breathing. 1 point. And then you go back and you go again. And it might, let's say you're going to meditate start out simple and start out for 3 minutes. And so you get 6 points because every 30 seconds, you get lost for 30 seconds and then you come back. What you'll find is when you start being aware of that, after a while, you'll get lost for 20 seconds and you realise you're off track. And then you get off track for 10 seconds and realise off track. Most people think meditating is about not getting off track, focusing on your breathing, but that's not going to happen when you start. And so most people give up, and they give up right at the exact moment that they should be patting themselves on their back, and they're cutting themselves down saying, oh, you suck, you're not thinking about focusing on your breathing. But it's not about focusing on your breathing, it's being aware of what you're thinking about. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, meditating it's pretty much changed my life. I used to bite my fingernails. I've bitten my fingernails since I was a kid. Mum used to paint that stuff on there, never could stop biting my fingernails. I've tried everything to stop biting my fingernails, couldn't stop biting my fingernails. About 6 months into learning how to meditate, I stopped biting my fingernails. Because when I'm biting my fingernails, I am here, but I'm in my head thinking about something else. I'm not present. And I bite my finger. And then 5 minutes later, my finger hurts. I look down and, I've torn it off to the quick. I didn't even know I did it. So the more present I got, the less I bit my fingernails. And the whole mental health thing, it's about not being present. It's about being in your, depression's being in your head thinking about the past. Anxiety's being in your head thinking about the future. But if you are aware of what's going on right now, none of that happens. So, being present is a huge part of mental health.
Warwick, I want to ask you about your ice baths and cold showers, because that's, about mindfulness in a way, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So I've been taking cold showers for almost 2 years now. And I used to hate the cold. I used to absolutely hate the cold. And I started taking the cold showers. I was actually in Australia in January, so it's not quite 2 years. I was in Victoria and it was a heat wave. There's like 40 degrees every day, and that's when I started taking the cold showers, not because of the heat wave, but that's just happened to me when I was reading about doing it, and that's where I started doing it. So they weren't terribly cold, but now I've actually got a chest freezer, like a deep freeze here in the garage, and I take an ice bath in that every day. And I have it set at about 8 degrees Celsius, which is pretty chilly. Sometimes I get it down to about 5, and it's only 2 minutes, but there's a lot of reasons for doing it. One of them is it's good for your mental health. And I just think you can't be, when you're depressed, you are in your head about stuff. You can't be in your head about stuff when you're in an ice bath. When you're in an ice bath, you're in an ice bath. You are very, very present. So it's supposed to be good for your mental health. And another thing for me is, have you ever jumped out of a plane or bungee jumped or anything like that?
No, I haven't. And I'm not like to.
Okay. So if anybody's listening to this, if you ever jumped out of a plane or bungee jumped and you're at the edge and half your body's like, part of your body's like, okay, you got to jump, and 95% of your body's going, no. And you're like, yes, and no, yes. No, you got that fight within yourself, that pushing through that fear. Well, getting in an ice bath, your body rejects it as heavily as it does jumping out of a plane or off the side of a cliff or whatever. And so every day you get to have that little mental argument with yourself. Like you're up in cattle country, so it might be, getting in the yard with a Mickey bull or something like, yes, no, yeah, that sort of thing. It's that thing. It's that mental struggle that part of you is telling you to do it, and a lot of your body's going, no, don't do it. It's part of the ice bath is just going through that every day, because your body does say, no. I mean, for a long time with the cold showers, because I don't have a complete cold shower, I get in and wash most everything, and then I turn it down to cold at the end. But every day I'd have that, oh, let's skip it today. We don't need to do it today. No, you got to do it. No, let's skip, and I went, I don't think I skipped one. I think I went for 12 months without skipping one. So every time I had a shower, which pretty much every day, I would turn it down to cold for 2 minutes at the end. But then I got the chest freezer and started doing the deep freeze baths. And yeah, it's good for me. It's good for depression. They use cold therapy to treat depression, but it's also good for the other part of your mental health, the controlling your mind and having it do something it doesn't want to do. Because and especially that level of rejection. Like I said, your body says no to getting in a chest freezer that's 8 degrees of water just as much as it does saying no to something that could kill you, like jumping out of a plane or, jumping a yard with a Mickey Bull or whatever. It's about the same level of no. Your body says no just as hard as it does doing some things that if it goes wrong, it might kill you, except there's no chance of it going wrong. So you really get to practice that, pushing through that every day in the comfort of your own home.
I go on a girls' trip generally around about March with some friends of mine. Our kids went through Distance Ed together and they live not far from me. Anyway, we go on this girls' trip every year. This year we went down to the Sunshine Coast and saw Elton John. And one day we went up around Montville or somewhere like that and went to Condalilla Falls on a walk, and they have this spectacular waterfall and waterhole there where you can swim, and I'm not a swimmer. And a couple of girls jumped in, so I thought, and same thing, will I, won't I? No, I don't want to. Anyway, I got in and swam over to where this waterfall was, and it was so cold. But honestly, Warwick, I felt exhilarated when I got out for about 2 weeks. So maybe the ice bath and the cold showers would work for me, because, gosh, it was when you're going through it, you're thinking, oh, can I do this? And but yeah, when you get out, you just think, oh, I'm so glad I did that. It was wonderful.
Yeah, there is a sensation you're warming up when you get out of that ice bath.
Yeah,
especially when it's pretty cold. Like I said, I've had it down to about 4 or 5 degrees, and it's almost like the colder it is, the more when your body's warming back up, you just have this. It's just it's very exhilarating feeling, and the other thing about it's feeling. It's a somatic experience, and when a lot of people when they when you have depression and things like that, you don't have any somatic experiences. And a lot of times I think people that are really shut down, a lot of times they're really tough. Like they do things and they can work all day without a drink of water or nothing. They just go. But it's not that they're tough. It's just they don't feel anything. And when you're thawing out from the ice bath, when you're in the ice bath, you're feeling, and when you're thawing out from it, you're feeling too.
Now, Warwick, one of my favourite stories of yours is, because I could so relate to it, and I'm sure everyone else can, but about the hire car and desperately trying to find how to open the fuel cap. But could you share that story with us? And I mean, it's such a great story and has such meaning, but the prelude to that is the story about Denise. So could you tell us about Denise and then about the car, because it's
I can definitely tell this.
Amazing.
I said a minute ago that book I was reading called Backbone, and the guy said, in order to be a fulfilled human being or whatever, a fulfilled man, you'd have 3 things. You've got to have a purpose in life, you've got to have a deep and authentic spiritual belief, and you've got to have, you've got to get rid of your BS. And for a lot of us, and for a long time, I had no idea what my purpose was. I was just kind of meandering along through life, taking things as they came. And I'd never really sat down and thought, what is my purpose? But, I've got I think I've got 20 million views on my YouTube channel now, and it started out helping people with their horses. And then as I've developed, it's kind of developed into more helping people, being aware of mental health, stuff like that. And so my wife she had a couple of friends of hers said, hey, have you been and seen Denise? And my wife's like, who the hell's Denise? And they said, oh, you're going to go see Denise. Here's a number, ring her up, make an appointment. And so Robin doesn't even know who Denise is. Rings her up, makes an appointment. Denise tells her where she lives. So my wife goes to her house and goes in there, and this lady, Denise, and Denise says, so where were you born, and what time were you born, and what day were you born? Well, it turns out Denise is an astrologer, and her mother was an astrologer too, and they used to do it with charts and do it all by hand. Now you put the dates and the time and the place into a computer program, it prints it up, and then they read your stars. And we're not into that sort of stuff, Never thought much of it. And I was away in Australia on some clinics, I think, but Denise records an audio recording of what she tells you at the thing. And so Robin rings me up that night. She goes, I just went and saw an astrologer today. And I'm thinking, righto. And she said, you would not believe what she told me, like what she knows about my life just from reading my stars. She said, you should go and see her when you get back. I got this recording. So when I got back, I listened to the recording. I'm like, that's pretty crazy. So I make an appointment, go see Denise. And anyway, I get in there and she prints the chart out and she looks at it and she goes, oh my goodness, you don't see this very often. I think the term is cryon, a wounded healer. I'm like, really? And she goes, yeah. She goes, now it says here that since the moment you've been born, your whole purpose here on this planet has been to gather a large number of people and to lead them towards consciousness. And I'm like, bloody hell, I didn't sign on for this stuff. I'm just a horse trainer. And then I thought, nah, that can't be right. She couldn't have got that out of there. So I've got an interesting name. No one in America's got my first name, and very few people have my last name. And so it's not like my name's Joe Smith or something. So I bet she Googled me before I came. She's looked me up. I'm really easy to find on YouTube or whatever. And yeah, she's just pulling me leg. This is all a scam. So I didn't believe that. I left there. And she told me some pretty interesting stuff. But I'm like, nah, that's too big a job and that can't be true. And so a couple of months later, I was in the US state of Michigan, and two of the most dangerous cities in the US are Flint, Michigan and Detroit, Michigan. And I wasn't in those two, but I've read the news. So Michigan's a scary place. And I'm also not an urban dweller. I'm a country boy. So I'm not real smart in urban situations. And I'd done a clinic. I had to fly out the next day, and I went to dinner with the clinic organizer, probably finished dinner about 10:30 that night, and I had to drive an hour back to my hotel, but I was going to have to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to get to the airport to drop the rental car off back, and I had to fill it up with petrol. I didn't prepay the tank of fuel, and if you take it back without filling it up, they charge you an arm and a leg. So on the way back to the hotel, so probably about 11:30 at night, I'm looking for a petrol station, and I'm in this like dingy, like industrial area, kind of very low socioeconomic looking sort of a place. And I pull into this petrol station, and it looks like a scene out of Boys in the Hood. You know what I mean? Like it's a scary looking sort of a situation. And so I pull up to the pump, I jump out. Now in America, you pay first, then you fill up. Okay, so I get out, I swipe my card, then I go to open the petrol cap on the car, and it won't open. So I jump in the car and I'm looking for the little button. Where's the button? I've opened the petrol cap and I can't find it. And I'm thinking, oh, what do I do? And I jump out and it's like, oh, unlock the doors. That's what you do. Sometimes you got to press the key to unlock the doors and then you can open it. I do that and it doesn't work. And I'm like, this is too scary. I'm out of here. So I press cancel on the pump and I jump back in the car, shut the door, and I start the car up, and I'm just about to drive off. And there's a big bang, 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 knock, knock, knock at the window. And I turn and look, and there's this African-American fellow with his face up against the window, and he's got this huge big neck tattoo and a bit of skin off one eye. And I'm like, oh, God. Anyway, he puts his hands up, and he steps back away from the window, and he's obviously gesturing like, I'm not going to hurt you. I don't want to hurt you. But I could hear him through the window. And what was odd was he didn't have like a ghetto sounding. I'm in like a ghetto looking area, and I've seen enough movies, so I'm expecting this bloke to, have that ghetto sound. And he had like an educated way of speaking, and it kind of stopped me in my tracks for a minute. So I wound the window down about an inch, and I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, excuse me, mister, I don't mean you any harm. He says, I'm from Alabama. I'm a gospel singer from Alabama or Mississippi, one of those places down south. I'm a gospel singer and I'm up here to help build a church, but it got called off and I wasn't notified. And so I've been sleeping in a porta potty for the last 2 nights and I just need $19 to get a room for the night. I'm going to get a lift back to Alabama in the next couple of days, but I just need $19 to get a room. And about this point in time, I'm thinking, yeah, I'll give him some money, you know. But he had an educated voice. And he went on to say that, you know, I've got a degree in religious studies from the Southern Baptist University or something or other. So he looks like a gangbanger, but he's an educated guy. And so by this point in time, I wound the window all the way down and I think I've turned the car off. And he said, well, my name's whatever. And I said, no, I'm Warwick. And we shook hands like our hands are right where the window would be sort of thing. We start shaking hands. And as we're shaking hands, he starts to sing. And this guy can sing. And he's singing this Southern Baptist gospel song, you know, and it's this, you know, the place is silent. It's 11:30 at night. There's no noise. And this guy can sing. And it's like this a cappella. And we're no longer shaking hands. We're holding hands. And I'm looking him in the eye and he's looking me in the eye. And it doesn't feel weird at all. And we're just holding hands through the window. So he sings this song and it takes 3 or 4 minutes to finish this song. We're just still holding hands, like looking each other in the eye. And then he starts to pray for me. And he's praying for me, blah, 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 and he's praying and he prays for a good 4 or 5 minutes. And we're still holding hands and looking each other in the eye and it doesn't feel weird at all. And then he stops praying and he looks at me like he's had some information from somewhere. He looks at me and he goes, I don't know what you do, mister, but your whole purpose, he said, I don't know what you do for a living, mister, but you have influence over thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of people. And he says, your whole purpose here on earth is to lead those people towards God. That the only thing holding you back is your fear. I'm like, shit, you got me in one. Like, there it is right there. And right as he said that, his left hand, we're still holding hands, his left hand reaches around behind him like he's reaching to his waistband for something. And I'm thinking, and I've got a backpack full of cash sitting on the seat beside me. And I'm thinking, so this is how it ends. And it was interesting because it was a very serene feeling. It wasn't like, oh, this is how it ends. It's like, well, now I know. This is how it ends. Anyway, he must have an itchy bum or something because his hand comes out from behind him and there's nothing in it. And anyway, so I gave him $100 and said, get some food, get yourself a room, good luck on your journey, whatever. So I rolled the window up and I'd start the car and I'd drive away and I pull out of that petrol station and I pull over on the side of the road, not very far from me. But I'm like, holy cow, what just happened?
Wow.
You know me from Adam, the astrologer lady. She knew my name before I showed up there. So I'm okay. I'm not buying it, because that's a bit too heavy. That's a big load to bear. So I'll just brush it off and say, no, there's that couldn't be true. She must have looked me up. But anyway, a month later, I have that happen in a petrol station in the other side of the country from where I live.
That is just amazing.
And I'm not really religious, but I think consciousness, God, all those things it starts with knowledge of self and getting yourself sorted. I don't think you can take in whatever that is without. So that's why I'm here talking to you. That's what I'm really interested in these days. And for the most part, people aren't asking me to talk about this stuff. For the most part, it comes across in the horse training stuff. I share anecdotes about how these days I probably have to do less techniques with horses because I feel different to them. Like there's a different energy about me. And that piques people's interest and they kind of go, well, what did you do? And, I'm not trying to run around the countryside preaching to people, but I'm trying to help them with their horses. But a lot of times the help they need with their horses is actual changes they need with themselves. You know, when I was at that that weekend retreat, there was a fellow there whose wife has horses, and he said, my wife has told me that she read this thing where your horse is a reflection of you. So he said, is that right? Like, if your horse is an arsehole, are you an arsehole? And I said, no, that's not really what it is. I said, I think horses are like a complete being, and you need to be a complete being to get along with them. And so if you are, you know, there's times where you have to be firm, and if you're too timid, you won't be able to get done what you want to get done. If you're too angry or not patient, when you're that stuff, you will have problems with your horse. If you're not, you know, any part of you that doesn't work, I think to get along well with the horses, especially the higher level stuff you want to do with horses, the more you have to have access to every part. You have to have the compassion, you have to have the empathy, you have to have the patience, you have to have the firmness, you have to have the bravery, you have to have the softness, you have to have all the parts. And if you don't have access to all the parts, you will find yourself at a junction with your horse to where you can't get through this bit. And so I said, yeah, I don't think they're a reflection of you, as in if your horse is an arse, you're an arse. But I do think that whatever's lacking in us sometimes is where the problems show up with the horse. You know, whatever part of us doesn't work as well as it could, I think that's where we'll have issues with our horses.
Warwick, I totally agree with you. And you could have even been talking then about raising children, because it's the same principle, isn't it?
A lot of the work at that 4-day, 3.5-day seminar was based, or quite a bit of it was based on a book called Warrior, Magician, Lover, King. They're like the 4 male archetypes. And the king does things for service of all. Okay, king's the ruler and he does things for service of others. The magician is the thinker. The magician is the plotter, the planner, the you know, getting all the details right. The lover is the one who brings the compassion, the empathy, that feminine side to it, and the warrior is the doer of deeds. And it's called the hero's journey. And everything you do in life starts out with the king. He comes up with the idea, and this is what we need to do. And then, you know, the magician figures out how to do it. The lover brings the feminine side to it, and then the warrior carries it out. And in that thing in that book, they talk about the shadow side of all those. And this is so much to do with men's mental health. He started out the whole weekend by saying most, you know, in tribal societies, there's a rite of passage to becoming a man. And since the Industrial Revolution, we've really lost that. And so a lot of us men are actually, like, I'm 53, so you're 53-year-old adolescents. You actually haven't made that step into manhood. You're not a child anymore, but you're not a man. And it was about the shadow, part of this was about the shadow side of all of those 4 parts. So if you don't get it right, there's a shadow side to it. And the shadow side to the king, so the king does things for the good of everyone. The shadow side to the king is the prince, and the prince is all about external validation. Okay, so the shadow, so if you get that bit wrong, you're doing stuff, are you doing it for the good of others, or you're doing it for external validation? The shadow side of the lover, if you get that wrong, there's depression or anxiety. You get the shadow side of the magician wrong, there's either passive aggressive, or I forget what the other one is. And then the shadow side of the warrior is you're a sadist or you're a masochist. But it's a fascinating book to read. The reason I mention it here, because it's a bit about men's mental health. It's a fascinating book to read because he talks about these archetypes. And I've got a highlighter as I'm reading it, and I'm like, this fella knows me. Highlight that, yeah, hell, that's me. That's been me all my life. And it's really, really interesting. But most of the work on the weekend was about that. I'd never heard of this book before, and apparently it's a big deal out there in what they call the men's work movement. I actually got a book the other day called A Circle of Men, and it's the original manual for men's support groups. So it's basically, think about what's the thing in Australia, the big blue shed, what is that, men's shed?
Oh, yeah, men's shed, yeah.
You know, and then you have the whole what's the other thing? Are you okay? Is that what it's called?
Yep. Are you okay day? Yep.
So I think this was started out called the Mankind Project, and so it's about men's support groups, and so it's, you know, Australians have never really had that until like the Men's Shed come along, and you know, and the you know, is it the Blue Tree Foundation? Is it what it's called? It's just stuff that when I was young, no one talked about it, and I think it's great. In the last maybe 10 years, 15 years or something or other, it's now, you know, men's mental health is something that's not only is it recognised, but people are actually talking about it. And this whole men's support group thing is, I wish I had known about this years ago. It's like, you know, it's like AA, but you're not an alcoholic. It's just, you know, it's MA, it's Men's Anonymous. There's just something really transformative about being in a room full of men and being able to be open and honest and having them listen to you and be empathetic. But then when they tell their story, you're like, hell, I've always hid that inside me and thought I couldn't tell anybody because I'd be laughed at, and everybody else here has got it too. It's kind of like a men's Me Too movement. You know, it's pretty amazing stuff. And it's, I don't know how much of that there is in Australia, but I just, that a lot of that stuff is based around that book, and that book I thought was just fascinating. I'm in the middle of reading it now, but it's absolutely fascinating.
Warwick, thank you so much. I was so looking forward to speaking to you, and I know it did take a little while for us to get together, but I think, I'm glad that it's worked out like this, and I really appreciate your time. And when you eventually get back to Australia, you'll have to come up into our country and run a clinic. Thanks so much for watching our video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please try to remember to just click on the subscribe button so we can keep you updated with everything that's happening. Thank you.